Today we've got a webinar for you guys on HubSpot's custom events. So this is a newly relaunched feature you may have previously known as custom behavioral events. It's a really, really powerful feature in HubSpot. So we've got a good panel together today. As I mentioned, I'm Ryan Gunn, Director of Demand Gen and Marketing Ops at Aptitude 8. We are a HubSpot Elite Solutions partner that specializes in technical consulting on HubSpot. I've also got with me Maggie Philban and Kevin Sundeen. Do a little intro of yourselves. Let's start with Maggie.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Maggie. I am the product manager for a team at HubSpot called Event Management. And we are focused on building tools that help get behavioral data into HubSpot, whether that be from apps or your website or anywhere throughout your tech stack.
Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Sundeen. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations at Curbio. Curbio works with real estate agents to get their clients' homes ready for listing and for sale fast with no payment due until the house sells. That's the Curbio spiel. I work on the marketing team here, making sure that our tech stack is working and enable all of the marketing and sales folks to do their job really well and with the data they need.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, so a quick overview of what we are discussing today. We're going to talk about the different types of data that are in HubSpot's data model, how custom events fit into that data model, generally what custom events are, and how they compare to similar HubSpot tools where there might be some confusion. There are 4 different ways to create custom events, so we're going to cover all of those. And then we're going to go over some real-world use cases for custom events, as well as how custom events can benefit your business if you do use them. So to start things off, we're covering HubSpot's data model and how objects differ from events. So I'm going to pitch over to Maggie. Why don't you tell us how these differ and how people can understand how they fit together?
Yeah, I got a little thing going because this is one of my favorite HubSpot topics that I'm quite passionate about. So if you've used HubSpot before, you usually run into the word object. It's kind of hard to use the platform without it, but it's actually only one of 2 primary components in the HubSpot data model. The other kind of happens underneath the hood without you quite realizing it. So there's objects, and then we also have events. Objects are tied together with associations, and then events are sort of like linked to a given object at a time. Now, part of the reason that you might not know that events are a separate thing is that they look actually really similar to objects. So like objects, events have collections of properties. They help you understand more metadata about the thing that has occurred. The way I lay them out here is the way I typically ask folks to think about it is think about if you are at like the DMV, or that's a very Americanized reference, but if you're at like a doctor's office filling out a form, right? The name on the top of that form, that's going to be the name of the object or the event. All of the various fields that they're asking you to fill out, those are properties. And what you put in those fields are called values. For objects, a sort of fully filled out sheet of paper, that's a record. For events, that filled out sheet of paper, we call that a completion in HubSpot. So they're structured really, really similarly. So why are they 2 different things? How are they different? So they're different because they represent different things. Events and objects are designed to tell you different kinds of data that's happening. So objects are designed to represent processes or relationships. They, by nature, then can evolve, right? One gets a promotion, their title changes. You're going to update their contact record. Someone changes companies, you might change the company that someone is associated with, right? So objects are designed to tell you the current state of something. Events, on the other hand, are designed to represent moments in time. They're designed to represent actions or things that occur. So these are immutable. They are a fact about a thing that has happened, and you can't go and change it. So it's something that's happened in the past that you are wanting to measure. And they are designed to tell you about historical changes, trends, very specific behaviors. Now, HubSpot actually sort of sneakily tracks a ton of different kinds of events out of the box without actually explicitly telling you that what they're tracking is event data. So if you think about things like a form submission, an email open, a website page view, Those are all examples of events that HubSpot tracks out of the box without you even knowing. They just kind of happen in the background and we collect that data. So why do I bother explaining this at all if it's not really present in HubSpot's navigation, right? It helps to draw the alignment between what custom events are and how you should use them. So if you know what objects are, right, they're designed to capture data about processes or relationships, and you know what custom objects are, they are designed to capture information about processes and relationships that are unique to you. Now you know what events are, their moments in time, their actions, their activities. A custom event is a moment in time, an action or activity that's unique to you. So that's why it's a little helpful to have that analogy in there.
The best way I think I heard you describe it when we were setting up this webinar is objects are nouns and events are verbs.
Like an example is someone is in our HubSpot instance, but they is like the object, but they are attending a webinar. That's the event.
Exactly.
Not to be with the event that is the webinar.
Oh, we're
yeah.
going to
yeah, that's where it starts to get a little confusing, which is a good segue. So what are custom events and what can you do with them? As I mentioned, are really just designed to allow you to capture activity data that's unique to you. They provide you insights about how folks are engaging with your brand across different channels. A lot of the really common use cases are going to be from places like websites or apps, but they're actually going to be able to be used to capture data from anywhere through your tech stack, as long as that data kind of has a timestamp is really the kind of data that we're looking for.
So why would someone use a custom event to track something instead of a custom property? What makes it different than saying like, when was the last time someone logged in and storing that as a custom property?
Yeah, there's that's one of my favorite questions. We get that question a lot. Another version of that question we get is, why is this different from custom objects? And really the key to that is the amount of metadata that you can store about that thing, right? So if you just have a custom property that's on your contact object, let's say, that captures the last time that someone logged into your app, let's use that example. All you can really capture is that date, time. You would then have to make another property for where in your app they were last logged into. You would then have to make another property to capture where they were logging in from. So it starts to kind of grow in a pretty crazy way. And imagine you have, 5 or 6 different channels that you're tracking user engagement on. You then now have 20 different custom properties that you're maintaining on your contact object. The other really big differentiator is that when a new thing occurs, those properties would get overwritten, right? Those object properties would get overwritten with the most current state of information. We have folks a lot of time want to track the history of a given object property. What they actually really need in that moment is an event that captures the thing that they're looking to track, because then you can see it happened on this day, 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 and you can build reporting and segmentation and automation around the frequency and cadence of things happening.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And to bring that into kind of the applicable is, for example, a while ago, almost 10 years ago now in my career, I was working for a company and we only stored that our customers would basically make an appointment. And we only stored the most recent appointment date as a contact field. So this is an example of how not to do it. Is we stored this as most recent appointment date. And so it was very difficult then to take action on that data to say, if we wanted to look at scale, how many times do people change their appointment, for example, we couldn't really do that. You could look at a record one by one and say, oh, Ryan, if I look into his property history, I can see he changed his appointment 3 times. But to be able to do that for multiple people, obviously you can't really dig that deeply at scale. So events, like Maggie said, is a really good way to kind of measure these changes over time.
Exactly. That is a perfect example of why events were sort of created.
All right. So this is a big one that I know causes a lot of confusion. There are so many different types of events within HubSpot. There are custom events, there are timeline events, there are marketing events. That we are in a webinar right now, which is an event. So how do you differentiate these different types of events in HubSpot, and how should you use them differently based on what that use case is?
Another really stellar question, and one that we definitely get a lot. It's interesting. The word event kind of means different things in different contexts, right? If you're talking to a marketer very specifically, the word event, the first thing that is going to come to mind is a conference or a trade show or something that someone attends in real life. The word event in this context is in the data sense of the word event. So, developers or HubSpot admins that might be more familiar with tools like Amplitude, Segment, or CDPs and product analytics tools tend to use this word event. And in that context, it really means a thing that occurs at a moment in time. And because we have both personas using HubSpot, right? Both marketers and admins, developers, things like that. We actually kind of use the word in both contexts. And so it does require a little bit of dissecting. What does it mean in this moment? The two instances that we use the word event in the sort of data context are custom events and timeline events. Custom events, as I mentioned, are for you as a customer to build out a piece of activity that is very unique to you and what you are looking to track across your various channels, right? Timeline events was sort of built for a different purpose. Timeline events was built for if you are building an app that you want other people to use, that you want other people to be able to integrate with HubSpot. That's what timeline events was actually originally built for. So it's a little bit different. If you're looking for something that's for your specific internal use, custom events is going to be the path that has the most support. It's most visible in places. Reporting is a really big one. It's available in all of the various different reporting tools versus the timeline events, which are really kind of just designed for public apps to be able to sync things to a HubSpot timeline. So those are the two contexts that we use the word event when we're talking about data. Interestingly enough, we also have this object that's called the marketing events object, which is the one that gets thrown in the way that we use it. And kind of also, interestingly enough, a marketing event can have events in the data context, right? So someone can attend an event. That is an event in the data context. I hope somebody out there is following that. But then the event itself, and let's take a real example. Let's take Inbound. So HubSpot has our annual conference that we call Inbound. Details about Inbound actually might evolve as the event gets planned, right? So the specific time, the specific speakers, who's registered versus who has confirmed, things like that, that's going to evolve as the event comes closer, as the event passes. That's a good way to think about why is this an object and not necessarily an event. Attending Inbound, now they've done an event. So it's a little bit tricky when you think about it, but using it in the context of like a real use case, like a conference that you are attending, helps to kind of sort through what the word means in a given context. I hope that was semi-digestible.
To put it in the context of this webinar is a marketing event, but you attending this webinar could be a custom event if we had an integration set up to put it on our contact timelines.
Yeah. It also could be an event that is within the marketing events object. The marketing events team has a fantastic import beta that's going right now. If you're looking for infrastructure around managing attendance and who's canceled, who has confirmed, the marketing events object, that import is creating events that are specifically designed for that. You can also use custom events for it because custom events is kind of like generic activity import. So it kind of depends on how much supporting functionality you're looking for.
We've got a question here in the chat. Are events only contact based? And can custom events appear on a company timeline?
Very great question. The answer is no, they aren't just contact based. So custom events right now can be linked to contacts, companies, deals, and tickets. This is some insider scoop, but we are also about to add custom objects to that list. Yes. And when you do that, they will appear. That's some insider scoop there, but it's confirmed. So I'll share that's coming. And when you do that, it will appear on the timeline the same way it appears on the contact timeline.
That's amazing. We've got a demo that I'm going to do later where having activity on a custom object would have been very helpful. We managed to make it work on the contact object, but I'll be sure to bring that back up when we get to that point.
Yeah, you'll be the first one that gets access to it.
Okay, so now we've got creating custom events. And I think a lot of people get confused about this, but there are 4 different ways that we can create custom events in HubSpot. Some of them don't require you to be a developer. Some of them do, or at least to know a little bit of code. So Maggie, do you want to walk us through each of these and how they might be useful?
Yeah, definitely. I'll just go left to right here. So starting with that, we've got our two codeless options on the left here. Starting with that event visualizer. This is a Marketing Hub exclusive feature. So this is the only part of the Custom Events app that is exclusive to Marketing Hub Enterprise. And this allows you to track very specific page views or clicks on your website without necessarily needing to know how to code. And it is an experience that when you drill into it, you type in your website, it will launch your website actually within HubSpot, kind of really similar to how the HubSpot CMS does. And then you can use a point and click experience to say, this is the click I want to track. You can also use it to track page views. One of the most common misconceptions or sort of misuses I see of the event visualizer, the page views by themselves are actually not any different in terms of the metadata that they capture than the regular page views that are captured by the HubSpot tracking script. So they're exactly the same. Why would you use the visualizer to capture a page view? It's really because of one very specific set of functionality. When you're wanting to use page views in places like lists or workflows, you can't do any sort of wildcard functionality to quickly grab many pages at once. So the use case that we see a ton is if you have a lot of blogs on your website and you want to have a single list that captures everyone that has viewed any blog, you can make a custom event that is hubspot.com/blog/wildcard. And that will fire every single time someone hits any of the blogs. So the event visualizer for page views makes it easier to capture many pages at once. If you're just trying to capture one page at a time, I would kind of say just use the tracking script for that, save yourself the pain. But it's a really great way to identify specific sets of page views that are important and unique to you. So that's one thing I want to highlight about the event visualizer very specifically, because that does come up quite a bit.
With the event visualizer, you mentioned that it'll bring up your website. If you have a web app, can you also use this visualizer to track different engagements within that web app?
You can, absolutely. What you need to do first is make sure that you're authenticated or logged into that app in a different tab before you try to bring up the visualizer. Because if you just try to type in sort of the URL of that SaaS app that you're trying to track, it's not going to work because we don't know the login to your tool. So you have to be logged in a different browser window, which is a little confusing. But once you are, you'll be able to track that just like any other website that you're configuring tracking on.
All right, let's move on to the import, which is my personal favorite because it makes it really easy for me to create a lot of demo data for the demos that I do for videos on LinkedIn. But I would imagine that most people are not using it because they want to create demos for their own personal content. So
Yeah.
how does the importer work and what is it most useful for?
HubSpot demos is definitely a niche use case of it, but you and a bunch of HubSpot sales reps do that very same thing. But the import is a beta feature that we have out right now. It's in public beta. I'm quite passionate about it. It essentially allows you to upload events and create or update contacts at the same time. Why would you use this? Why is it different than regular import? My sort of hot take is that there's a lot of things that we use the standard contact import for that are probably better off with an event import. I'll give you an example. If I am working with a vendor who I'm doing, let's say, direct mailers through, and they've sent me back the list of people that have engaged with the direct mailer, let's say like when they responded to it, things like that. If I upload that as just a contact list, I might lose all of that metadata that I want to capture about the thing that that person actually did, right? What mailer did they fill out? How did they respond to the questions on the form? All of that sort of rich information, which drives better segmentation and ultimately better targeting, gets lost if you just upload the list of who did it, right? And that's kind of the beauty of event import. It allows you to upload not just who someone is, but also what they did that is making you upload them in the first place, right? It'll show up on the activity timeline. It's available as an event in segmentation and reporting. So it's a little bit of an extra boost on your standard contact import. I give that direct mail example. Any sort of like one-off lead activity, this is fantastic for. One of my other favorite use cases is actually backfilling data. There might be a lot of integrations that you have with other tools in your tech stack that don't quite work in the way that you want them to. A great example is like activities that you might be loading from Salesforce. If you want to use those in customer journey analytics, which requires them to be an event, this is a great way to kind of get that data in. It lets you backfill data from various systems across your tech stack and sort of get the data in the format that is usable for you.
Yeah, I think this solves a huge problem for especially marketing and how marketing ops folks work. I had a colleague who was in charge of like a gifting campaign. And this is a great use case for that to say, hey, did you send this person a gift? When did it get sent? Beyond, or if you've sent multiple, again, this is an awesome place to say, okay, we've sent multiple gifts to this person. And then maybe say you send multiple gifts and then they convert on your demo form or whatever it is, right? At that point, you could even then count the number of gifts you sent of custom events that happened, whatever your case is, say, okay, now you can start looking at how many gifts or whatever does it take to get this person to convert.
Exactly. And it goes right back to that conversation about why are events not just properties on an object? And that's a perfect example of why, right? If you're doing something like tracking someone's engagement with something that you're sending them physically in the mail or virtually, and they do something multiple times, if you're using object properties to capture that, first of all, it's probably a hairy list of object properties. But second of all, you lose every piece of engagement that's happened in the past if you don't, like once a new piece of engagement comes in. So that's why they're really perfect for things like that.
We've got two coded options here. So we've got JavaScript for your website as well as sending custom events via API. So I know Kevin has pretty deep experience with sending via API. So why don't we jump to that one and then we can go back to JavaScript.
That sounds great.
I can talk a little bit, Maggie, or do you want to explain what it is and I can go into my use case?
Yeah, I can give like maybe an opener. So we have actually two endpoints that make sending data via API easy for custom events. So the first one is relatively new. If you haven't looked at the custom events functionality in a while, you might not have seen it. Something that was true for a really long time with the custom events feature is that in order to use this API function, you had to, or use the API endpoint, you had to log into HubSpot and create your event first in the custom events app before you could send data to it. We've now created an endpoint that allows you to do all of it via API. So there's two endpoints that kind of serve as step one, step two. Step one is the create event definitions endpoint that lets you create your event essentially template and all of the properties that are within it. Why do we make you do that at all is probably a good question. It's really kind of about data management best practices, right? We want to make sure that you are, since these events are going to show up in essentially all of HubSpot, we want to make sure that you are essentially properly configuring the properties that you want to capture about that event and that you're naming them and sort of organizing them in a way that makes them the most usable for you. It also allows you to edit the schema or the collection of properties of a given event a little bit easier when it's sort of its own concept, right? So that's step one, is to create the event definition, is what we call it, using the first endpoint. And then the second endpoint is to send completion data. So Kevin clicked this button 100 times. You're going to send 100 completions to the completions endpoint. But I'll let Kevin speak to his experience setting up custom events.
Yeah, what I've done at Curbio here is we have a mobile application for iOS and Android, and we've been using the API to feed mobile app events into HubSpot. Mostly not all events. That's kind of the key here that Maggie talked about is like you have to create the events first, and it's important to think through what events, as a marketer or salesperson or RevOps, like that you actually need to take action on, and just create, you don't want to overwhelm yourself with data, but just create what you need. And then, for me, it's essentially ask your devs to help you. But it's really not tremendously difficult. And I know there's tools like Amplitude, Segment. Maggie probably knows the whole list of everything that can actually pass those events into custom events. So whether you're pulling it out of Firebase into Amplitude or however you're doing it, your devs should be able to basically look at the documentation and then either set up the events themselves or start passing data to them as well. And like Maggie said, what's really important as well is to figure out what metadata you want on your event so that you can take more specific action off of it. Like it's, helpful to know, okay, somebody logged in and when, but like you may, and I think, for example, device might be included in that. But if it's not, you may want a custom attribute on the event so you know what kind of device they're using. And so you can then tailor your follow-up and all of your experience after that.
Yeah, for sure. The more custom property data that you capture, the richer segmentation you sort of unlock for yourself downstream. There's 32 default properties that come out of the box with these events that are sort of geared towards digital engagement a little bit. So things like device type are something that is created by default that you can fill when you send data via API. But really, you can get super creative. If you have designations in your app about the kinds of users that are using it, you can create those as custom properties and then have that available in segmentation for your events.
Awesome. Last one, JavaScript. Yeah, I probably know the least about this one, so would love to get your take on how that works.
That's okay. It's very powerful, but it, as a result of being as powerful as it is, there's so many different possibilities. It's kind of hard to know what exactly that you're supposed to use it for, right? So how this works is when you drill into it, it's really similar to some of the other event creation methods where it asks you to create your properties and things like that. But what you ultimately end up on is a code snippet. And this code snippet will append sort of on the bottom of your HubSpot tracking script. So the HubSpot tracking script that you have on your website or app, it allows you to essentially append custom code to it. The tricky thing about that is it requires you to know how to write JavaScript. There's a default snippet in there that's meant as an example, but you have to actually modify the snippet to tell us what conditions do you want this event to fire under. The possibilities are kind of endless. Some of the more common use cases are things like scrolls or scroll depth. Those are some really powerful ones that folks like to capture. Clicks with custom metadata is also super common. So if I am specifically tracking a download and I want to capture a bunch of metadata about that download that I can't capture via the visualizer, that codeless experience, custom JavaScript is great for that. One of my favorite ways to use the custom JavaScript functionality is actually to pull data from other tools that are embedded onto your website. As a use case example, if you have YouTube video views on your website, you can configure an event to fire pulling data from YouTube's APIs that tells you how much of a given YouTube video someone has watched. So it really is insanely flexible. It's just a matter of knowing enough JavaScript to get a little creative with it.
So we've got a question in the chat here. Can you track custom web app activities other than page views and clicks? For example, steps in a multi-step form. So I think this would probably be the best way to track something more advanced than just a page view or a click.
Yeah, exactly. That codeless event visualizer is really just for specific page views and clicks. Anytime you want to get a little bit more complex than that, the custom JavaScript is the perfect feature to do that.
Awesome. All right, let's move forward to use cases. We're going to go through some kind of real world use cases for how you could implement custom events. So the first example we have is equipment performance monitoring. And this is a really interesting one because it's not actual behavior that the contact or the customer took. It is something that is happening that is related to them, but they may not even be aware that it's going on. So here we've got a contact, Jordan Smith, who is a customer at an internet service provider. They are renting a router, and that internet service provider wants to monitor how that equipment is performing. So we've got a custom event here for an equipment error. And here we're capturing a bunch of those custom event properties, error name, error code, the type of equipment, the model number, and the priority of the error. So this is all stuff that is being sent from the router. This is probably a custom API setup. There's also, because we're capturing all of this property information, there's automation that we can do to help support this customer. I have a workflow here that is triggering off of equipment error. So anytime an error happens, we are going to enroll them in this workflow. And basically what we're looking at is different properties within that event and branching off of them so you can treat different types of errors differently. This first branch is looking at the equipment type. So if you have different support teams for routers versus modems, you can notify someone on your router team that that error code was sent. Down the modem branch, I've also branched on the priority of the equipment error. So if we've got a high priority error code, we might want to send that to a different team that's responsible for like urgent customer support versus a low priority error code, which the customer might be able to fix themselves, or it might resolve by itself after a certain amount of time. But these are just examples of like how you could treat custom events differently in terms of segmentation. This is also the example I was talking about where custom events on a custom object would be helpful, because we have a custom object up here for the equipment, and we have been triggering the error onto the contact record. Whereas it would be great to be able to look at this router and see all of the errors that have occurred there. And then because one router may be associated with multiple different contacts.
Yeah, it seems like that's going to be a perfect solve for you guys there.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. That is something that, like I said, is probably using the custom API setup. This next one, in-person interactions, is using the importer. So let's move over to this one. I've got a custom event here for met at event. And again, we're using that term event in this case in the marketing sense, like a conference or a trade show. So in this example, your sales team may have gone out to a conference or event and they've met a bunch of people, and you just want to record the fact that they met your sales team at that event. So I'm going to walk quickly through how you would set up an import of that data. So if you were going to do this from scratch, you would be creating a new event. I've already got this one existing. So I'm going to hit edit event.
Ryan, while we're waiting, can you talk maybe a little bit about when you would use this versus like creating an activity in HubSpot with your sales rep?
Yes.
Person.
So I think there's a few different ways that you could go about it. One is creating an activity. I think activities tend to, so you could create a meeting activity, but because this might just be like a handshake or an exchange of business cards, it's not necessarily something that would warrant that like level of detail that you would get with a meeting activity. It's because you're not hosting it. It's also probably not a fit for a marketing event where you're capturing a lot of data about, the setup of that event. So this is like a really simple, you just want to capture like a point in time that happened. So we've got this loaded up when you are.
I can see this being really helpful for like somebody visiting your table or something.
Exactly.
Like you've got a booth.
Yeah. Like you have that bowl at your booth to drop in a card.
I think to kind of add, I would say activities are really good if you want to capture like long form information. If I had a call with someone and I want to write a ton of notes about that call, it's a great way to do that. This is much better for like scale. If I want to just create a ton of these at once, I love that like fishbowl of business cards at an in-person event example. If there was a way to like scan those business cards in a HubSpot, I wish that existed, but this would be a great way to sort of capture, once you get them all in your spreadsheet, get them in there and you can have reporting on what conference they met you at.
So to set up this custom event in the importer, you got to give it a name. We've already got one in here because we're just editing it. And then you're selecting a file. This probably looks really familiar if you've ever done a contact import, but I've got a spreadsheet over here with some info. So the very basic information that you're going to need for any custom event upload is something to identify the object that you're associating the event to, as well as when that event occurred. So in this case, we're using contacts. And so we're going to identify them by their email address. And then occurred at is the date that it happened. And this is actually a date time property. So if you wanted to add the time that it happened in there, you could. In this case, I've just used the date. And then we've got a custom event property for event name. So this is the name of the conference that we went to or the event that we met the person at. So if we upload We find our spreadsheet here, and we're going to hit next. So again, this looks very similar to a normal contact upload. The difference here is that you can map these different pieces of data to both contact properties and custom event properties. So there's a drop down right here where you can select either one, and then that's going to change what you see in this secondary drop down, which will be either the list of contact properties or the list of event properties. In this case, email is a contact property. We're mapping it to that email property. Event name is a custom event property. So we can select that here. If it's something that you don't previously have set up, you can create a new property and then just detail what that property is, type in event name, and you can set it up that way. And then lastly, this occurred at, that's a required property for any custom event upload. And then just some additional details you need to fill in here, and you hit finish import, and it will upload everything. And then you've got your custom events loaded in. So you can see here that we met Paul Jones at the event. You can see what event we met them at. And that's an easy way to track those like quick in-person interactions.
Yeah, I think another really good use case related to this import is like for this import is if you don't have the resources or know how to set up like a custom API driven integration between two pieces, this is a really good way to do it kind of in reverse, like Maggie mentioned, for backfilling. So if we go back to that like gifting example, say you're gifting whatever tool you're using, all that data is siloed over there. If you can get it out into Excel and format it, you can get it into HubSpot.
That's another really great way to make integrations work that don't quite exist or that don't work in the way that you want them to.
Okay, so we've got one more use case here, which is a PLG free trial nurture campaign. So this would be an app company that is offering free trials, and they want to track that journey from someone signing up for a free trial all the way to upgrading to a paid account. So if we click over here, I have a customer journey analytics report set up that is using 6 different custom events to track that journey from sign up to upgrade. Each of these stages here is a separate custom event. This is kind of the expected flow that someone would take from when they sign up to when they upgrade. So creating an account, logging into the account, setting up their profile, creating a project, clicking an upgrade notification, and then completing that upgrade. And you can see within this report if people are skipping steps. So in this case, it looks like people might be skipping straight from creating the account to clicking an upgrade notification. That's awesome. But other people are taking all of the steps through the journey and then eventually upgrading. And you can see where people are churning out of this journey, where they're not moving forward. If they're skipping steps that you actually want them to take, then there are things you can do within the product or within some customer marketing or customer support in order to kind of optimize this flow so that you can get more people to that final upgrade step. I have a workflow here that kind of walks through some things you could do from a customer success and marketing perspective in order to facilitate that journey. So this triggers off of creating an account. When someone signs up for a free trial, they complete that custom event and that loads them into this workflow. And then we're going to be using this delay until event action. This is a really, really powerful workflow action to use together with custom events, because what it's going to do is it's going to delay for up to 3 days or until they log into the account, whichever happens first. So you're kind of saying when someone creates an account, we want to give them a buffer of 3 days to actually log in before we want to start pestering them with like, hey, why haven't you done this yet? But the second they take that step to log into the account, it will trigger the next step of the workflow. And we can use a branch to treat people differently based on whether they complete that step or they do not in that allotted delay. So if someone does not log into their account after 3 days, we can shoot them an email and say, hey, don't forget to log into your free trial account. And then after that, you can create more delays and send more notifications. You can create notifications for your team to check in on that customer, all with the goal of driving them towards completing that step, logging into the account. When they do complete that step, then you're going to move them on to the next expected step, which would be setting up their profile. So this is exactly the same. We've got an expected amount of time that might take, and then a branch on whether or not they completed it. So we can kind of daisy chain these actions together, these delays waiting for the event, while sending reminders when to keep people kind of on that track, all with the eventual goal of getting them down here to your account has been upgraded. When they complete that, we congratulate them. If they don't complete that, then we want to like push them to that upgrade. So, create some urgency, maybe remind them that if they don't upgrade, they're going to lose anything they've created in the free trial. And then eventually, if they don't upgrade at all, sending them some stuff to say, don't worry, you can still upgrade at any time in the future. And that maybe passes back to marketing to re-engage them. So this is like a big, scary, complex workflow, but it is kind of powering the customer success and the marketing side of moving people through this journey using custom events.
That's an insanely powerful workflow.
Yeah, that is it. It was certainly
I'm kind of picking my jaw off the floor here.
So we saved PLG for last because that is also the use case that Kevin and Curbio use most commonly. So Kevin, do you want to share with us how you guys have been using custom events?
Yeah, I don't have as many fancy workflows to show off as Ryan, but I'll do my best to explain it here. So what we've done at Curbio is we have, like I said, we have a mobile app, and we're passing a lot of that mobile app data into HubSpot in the form of custom events. So within the mobile app, we pass things like, just that somebody is logged in, but as well as more complex things. So in our mobile app, somebody can create what we call an estimate, which is they basically enter in a home address and they kind of like build out their renovation plan right there in the mobile app, which is pretty cool. But they can like build it out and just check it out, see what the price would be like, add, remove work orders, that kind of thing. But it's all done right there in the app. They actually don't have to talk to Curbio at all, and they get kind of an estimate of the pricing. However, that's all cool. But for Curbio, what we want them to do is talk to sales. So at this point, we have that estimate created event that you can see here. And we're collecting a lot of metadata. For example, what is the listing address, right? Where is this home that somebody wants to renovate? Is it in one of our markets? As well as you can see their estimate ID, which is like a unique identifier in our backend database for the actual estimate that somebody has built. Because somebody could build multiple estimates for the same unit, or they could have multiple addresses they're trying to renovate. So we capture all of that nuance with estimate ID. From there, then we can then trigger marketing activity to say, hey, saw you created this estimate at, 123 Main Street, and you could even add other event properties. For example, in the mobile app, we pull in from Google Places, we pull in a picture of the property right there. So you could even plug it into other APIs to really customize that email with the goal of getting them to say event estimate submitted, which is that they've actually, they say, I want to talk to sales and get started on this project. And from there, then what we can do is we can build a deal for our sales team right in the pipeline. You can trigger all sorts of automation on that as well to say, pull them out of marketing nurtures, put them in the sales process, assign them a contact owner, all of those things. And because you have that estimate ID, all of that and all those other metadata, that's exposed in your workflow trigger. So you could actually then copy all of that right onto the deal. So sales knows exactly, say they have access to that estimate ID table. They could even pull up, and this is what we can do in the Curbio kind of backend app for our sales team, is they can actually look at all of the details of that mobile app estimate and say, I saw you wanted to renovate a bathroom. Looks like you want to do flooring. Have you thought about, repainting, etc. So it's really, really powerful way to pass that data around so that your teams can take action on that. And you can automate a lot of that activity to push them down the funnel.
Very cool. I'm going to skip over this slide because I think we've already covered a ton of benefits in our use cases and answering some of the questions that have already come across. But, quick overview, it's going to help you with automation. It's going to help you attribute revenue and contact creation and all kinds of stuff back to events that you have recorded. You can segment better, and it's going to create better team alignment between your marketing, sales, and product team. The last thing, I got to do some shameless self-promotion here. So we did publish a complete guide to custom events. This is on our website now. It covers a lot of the stuff that we covered today in more depth. We've got some cool video demos, including a longer one about that PLG workflow that I showed off. And we also have a Curbio case study. So as I mentioned before, Curbio was a client of ours. I personally worked on that project. It was one of my favorite things to work on because Kevin gave us some really cool projects. And we have published a case study on how we helped them implement custom events, how we helped optimize their partnership operations in HubSpot, and did a lot of cool stuff with them as a client.
And much more.
And much more. Okay, so I think that's going to close us out for today. And thank you guys for joining me here. Maggie and Kevin, you guys were amazing guests. And we'll talk to everybody later.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, y'all.